The first reading comes from Psalm 34, verses 1 through 8. We'll read this together in unison. I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise shall continually be in my mouth. My soul makes its boast in the Lord. Let the humble hear and be glad. O magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt his name together. I sought the Lord, and he answered me, and delivered me from all my fears. Look to him and be radiant, so your faces shall never be ashamed. His poor soul cried, and was heard by the Lord, and was saved from every trouble. The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him, and delivers them. O taste and see that the Lord is good. Happy are those who take refuge in him. The next reading comes from Mark chapter 10, verses 46 through 52. They came to Jericho. As he and his disciples and a large crowd were leaving Jericho, Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, a blind beggar, was sitting by the roadside. When he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout and say, Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me. Many sternly ordered him to be quiet, but he cried out even more loudly, Son of David, have mercy on me. Jesus stood still and said, Call him here. And they called the blind man, saying to him, Take heart, get up, he is calling you. So throwing off his cloak, he sprang up and came to Jesus. Then Jesus said to him, What do you want me to do for you? The blind man said to him, My teacher, let me see again. Jesus said to him, Go, your faith has made you well. Immediately he regained his sight and followed him on the way.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I've said it every time and I say it again. It's a privilege and an honor to be invited to preach here at Norfield. We've heard it in the context of our stewardship campaign that Norfield is a special place. But my favorite place to hear it is when people are outside of the church and talking to people who've never been here and never seen it and trying to describe it. Trying to describe what it is to have the young families and the older families and the people who've been here for decades mixed in with people who are just visiting us and figuring out if this might be a home. It's a special place. You know it's a special place when people talk about it as a special place and it has nothing to do with fundraising or with cheerleading or anything else. So I am honored to be asked once again to be here. And thank you for giving me the pulpit. The occasion of it, Reformation Sunday, means a lot to me. And maybe I'll get into that and maybe I won't. For many of you, Reformation Sunday doesn't ring a lot of bells. I'll talk a little bit about it during the sermon this morning. Will you join me in prayer? May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be always acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock, our refuge, our Redeemer. Amen. How kind of you to let me come. How kind of you to let me come. Henry Higgins teaches Eliza Doolittle this little line. How kind of you to let me come. And he's working on making her sound more genteel, more gentle, more gently born in the English sense of the word, more like a gentle lady. And it is no generalization to point out to you that all of these words, gentle, genteel, gentle-born, gentlewoman, gentleman, they share a certain genius, and they belong to the same genus that makes them genuine and germane. Because every one of these GEN words that I've used shares in its generation a single ancient root word that means being born. That is, born to a parent and born into a society for the child. And from the same old root word with a K form instead of a G, we get K words: kin, kindred, kind, and kindness. And we are all one of a kind. And that means both things. We are unique, and we all belong to the same family. We are one of a kind. Last week at the Unitarian Church, I saw a bumper sticker in the parking lot that said, "Humankind, let's do both." The spirit that animates all of these gen and ken words is the spirit of relation itself. We are not born alone unto ourselves, but we are born into a family. The Gospel stories of Jesus, in fact, begin with this simple fact of kinship, because it's in the context of the first census of the Roman world that Joseph goes up to Bethlehem, the city of David, because he is of the house and lineage of David. And the Gospel of Matthew memorably opens with a tedious rattling off of generation after generation of ancestors in order to place Joseph in David's family line, among David's kindred. Throughout the Gospels, we read about Jesus addressing the simple questions: who is my brother? Who is my neighbor? Am I my brother's keeper? And all of these questions are asking, what kind am I? It's fun to watch his disciples miss the point time and again as Jesus expands the definition of kinship and of kindness. Remember, for example, Jairus, the Roman official, who wanted Jesus to come and help heal his daughter lying in a coma, and the Roman centurion who asked for Jesus to heal his slave. The disciples asked these outsiders, "Why are you bothering the master?" And behind their question is, "You are not his kind. You Romans don't belong." But Jesus went, and he helped them, and he healed for them. Remember all the people who were ritually unclean, untouchables, people to be avoided, shunned, ignored, the lepers, the paralytic lowered through the roof, the lame, the deaf and the mute and the blind, and the mentally challenged who were then called demon-possessed. All of them were touched by Jesus' healing hands and thus treated kindly, treated as his kin. So today's gospel story of the healing of blind Bartimaeus is just one among so many, showing how Jesus expanded the framework of kinship and thus the working of kindness. And the society of Jesus' time was vocal about their opposition to this redefinition of kin. Why does this man eat with tax collectors? Remember, he's talking about Matthew here. And with sinners. He's talking about the rest of the disciples. Why does he let his followers break the Sabbath rules? Why does he consort with women of ill repute? I'm speaking in Bible talk here, but translated into modern terms for yourselves. Perhaps most suspect of all, Jesus talked with children. The disciples tried as hard as they could to keep him from being pestered by the kids. But Jesus said, "Let the children come to me." In fact, why don't you all go ahead and become children yourselves? And that's the key. To be children is to be born to a family. In this case, the family of God, the family of our common humanity. Jesus, the rabbi, the teacher, had just as much to say about kinship and kindness as Jesus the healer. Think of his parable of the Good Samaritan, a second-class citizen, a real outsider. By definition, Samaritans, not our kind of people. The Samaritan is the righteous man in his parable, the one who does what is good and right and kind for his neighbor. And think now of the story of the man with 2 sons. One of the sons says, "Oh, yes, Father, right away, Father," and fails to do the task. And the other, who is disrespectful, says, "I just don't feel like it. You're not the boss of me." But the second son goes ahead and does what was asked of him. Thinking of his greatest teaching, the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus continually expands the law from applying to a narrow kinship to a broad one. "You have heard," he says, "but I say." And every time he says, "You have heard," he quotes the received law. And he says, "But I say." He expands its meaning. "You have heard it said, an eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not return evil for evil, and turn the other cheek." Now, there are a few passages of Scripture where we are given a great gift, the gift of seeing Jesus not quite get his own message. So he has to learn that even his expanded view is not enough. The Samaritan woman at the well, which Reverend Wilson preached on a few months ago, for example, where the woman reminds him even the dogs get to eat the scraps that fall from the master's table, and goads Jesus into expanding to include her. And that little bit in the Gospel of Mark where Jesus' mother and brothers are asking for him, and he says, "Who are my mother and my brothers?" We look to Jesus as we try to understand our own lives here and now. The Gospels say of him, "He will not break a bruised reed, a dying wick he will not quench." That is, kindness, gentleness, patience, peace are the gifts we see embodied in him, and the same gifts we would want to have and to use ourselves. None of our children from high school age down remember a world before September 2001. And there are a few in this room who remember the world before the Great Depression, even if only from stories told by parents. And nobody here remembers the world of this congregation's founding, the Norfield Church of 1757. But as different as our world is from the world of our children, our grandparents, and their great-grandparents, this is our world, and these are our people. We belong to this kindred, and we owe all kindness. Twice as long ago as the founding of Norfield Church, 498 years ago this week. It's going to be a big year in 2017, the 500th anniversary. The Reformation of the Western Church began with a splitting of our kindred, a splitting which continues to this day. The work of the church, becoming the church, is the work of answering the same questions that were asked in the Gospels. Who is my neighbor? Am I my brother's keeper? Do you belong to me, or are we of different kinds? I was raised in the Roman Catholic Church, and during my time in college worked in a Lutheran church, where a friend of mine from that congregation led me through the Lutheran Book of Concord, a sort of history plus catechism of the Lutheran Church, while I led her through a reading of the Roman Catholic Catechism. And we asked each other questions, and we supported one another as we investigated our religion without any of the animosity that kept my grandmother from attending her best friend's wedding, because her best friend's wedding was in a Protestant church, and the bishop would not permit my grandmother to enter such a building. We've come a long way in my lifetime, and we have a long way to go until we are truly one in the Spirit. Now, in this season of celebration of the gifts of God, let us have kindness, understanding that we are children of God. Thus we are kindred one with another. And this is true whether our parents fought against one another in a family feud or in a great war. Whether we see a resemblance in our skin or hear an echo in our language. Whether we call on God in one manner, in one place, by one name, or in another manner, in another place, by another name. Or whether we do not call on God at all. Whether we beg for help or are begged for help, we are kindred one with another. In this time of stress, turmoil, and strain among all the people of the world, let us be kind as we are kindred, children of the same God. All are our kin. All merit kindness, yes, even the unkind, who will not admit us as kin. In the movie Harold and Maude, a personal favorite, the socially awkward Harold says to Maude, "You're very good with people." And she giggles and replies, "Well, they're my species." Jesus ended the Sermon on the Mount with this simple observation: the harvest is plentiful, the laborers are few. Let us harvest the plentiful gifts of God: love, faithfulness, patience, generosity, peace, kindness, and let us strive to live always as brother, sister, parent, child, as kindred, and filled with loving kindness. May God give us the grace to make it so. Amen.